but I did want you to have, the whole amount of information that was available. And so right now we have from the census, and it's part of the redistricting program, and that's why it's been released. It's population, housing units.
Excuse me one quick second. I just want to note that I just started to record. So all we've done so far are the minutes. So I just want to, for those that may jump in at some point, apologize for that, but we approved the minutes from September. All right, sorry, Karen.
No, thank you. So again, we have population, housing units, total housing units, and occupied housing units. We have race, Hispanic origin, which, just to be clear, are two different things. And we have population by age under 18 and 18 and over. That's all that's been released at this point. The rest of the 100% count, which will give us more information on units, descriptors, and things like that, that won't be out according to the census as of yesterday until sometime in 2022. But they did not give even a month. That just said 2022. Tentatively 2022. So that's where we are with that information. And there were a couple of things that I was looking for when I pulled the data set. One, obviously, we want to know, what they think our count was. And the population count for 2020 was 1,135. So that was above their estimates. So that's certainly tracking with what we know. The other thing that I was looking for is the housing units. And as you know, in the few years ago, 2017, 2018, we were a bit concerned because their housing unit counts were way below what we thought our housing unit counts were by taking 2010 and adding on to, with our permitting. And I'm pleased to say that the 2020 numbers, in terms of total units, track very well with both permits, but more importantly, it tracks extremely well with our assessing information. And I just think that that is remarkable and so much better off than I thought we were 3 years ago. And I want to give a lot of credit to Robin in Jay's office, because what we did when the census first started doing some of their preparatory work, they offered communities the option of providing some more detail about where units were. And so we set up the link, and Robin became our liaison with the census. And I think she clearly did some remarkable work, because they've vastly improved their understanding of the housing units here. And the difference, I'll tell you, they had about 10,300 more or less units, in the 2020 census. And our assessing records have 10,500. And the assessing data is exactly 1 year later. And that just, I can't tell you how amazed I am that it is as close as it is. I wasn't worried about our data. I was definitely worried about theirs. So in that, what I would say is, obviously we've added 3,000 plus new people, net new people over the past 10 years. That tracks at about 17% increase. The 17% increase compares to previous decades. If we look at 2000, 2010, we're above that. If you look at the decade previous to that, 1990 to 2000, that was about 35% increase. So, we're certainly grew faster than the decade before, but we haven't grown faster than previous decades. So, you know, it's all about how we're managing the growth, you know, in terms of how that feels, but there's nothing remarkably different with respect to total numbers than previous decades. Again, we're still clearly a very attractive community. People want to live here. So I think the other pieces that we have in terms of race and ethnicity, we basically doubled our people of color in the area. I think we were about 5% in 2010, and now we're 11%. And I've just done that by taking the non-white, the white-only population, and compare that to the rest. So, you know, we're certainly not anywhere near, you know, Portland or some of the larger cities, but there has been an increase.
Does that include Hispanic? I know the race in Hispanic is kind of a weird division in the census data, but
so Hispanic origin is considered an ethnicity, not a race.
right,
So you could consider yourself Caucasian or white.
white and Hispanic at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't know that yet, although I think we can begin to separate that out if we wanted to.
Just
But-
curious more than anything else.
Yeah.
We talk about non-white,
Right.
what we're referring to there. So
Exactly. So it depends on how they classified their race. If they classified their race as something other than white, then they would be in that. But if you do that last column, which is the Hispanic population, I believe we're somewhere around 400 in there. Yes, and that's about 2% of the population. I didn't compare that to. I don't think actually. Jay, would you go down? Did I do
I
Hispanic? I didn't do Hispanic on the comparison back to 2010. I will do that just to see. But it, you know, again, we're certainly we're microscopically inching towards a little more diversity than we had in 2010. So,
You know what it is for the state of Maine?
oh, off the top of my head, I don't, but I can get that for you.
Spain still is,
Yeah,
if not the whitest, it's one of the top.
Single digits,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
yeah,
You know, 7 or 8%, I think.
Yeah.
something like that.
yes. And so you can see Cumberland County. I think I just did on this one the percent white. So we're 89% white, and the county as a whole is 87%. Right. So again, we're some good and interesting facts coming out. We look forward to additional releases. In terms of the next piece, which is, you know, Scarborough by age. Jay, if you don't mind pulling that up. A couple of things, we're right about 19%. I didn't pull all the 2010 data because I wanted to do it by.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to do it for all the different communities. So I'll that's my next step. But Jay, if you scroll up the map a little bit. So these are the census tracts. As you remember, we had a part in defining that. So there were 4 census tracts in 2010. Now we have 6. Yes. And when we looked at the percentage of folks who are under 18, they are the percentage of under 18 is much higher for the western part for that. Thank you. That. So actually go back up to the.
I was going to say, yeah, where do we have that?
Yeah, that's 25%. So that.
Which one's that, Karen?
That's
So, this guy?
173.06, yeah. So that is that western census tract. And what will take a little bit more time to do is track that back to 2010 to see if it was different. Part of the reason is we have to go back to the block groups because we did change those borders. So we've got to do a little more digging to figure out the 2010 population. And, again, 25% of that census tract is under 18. That is the largest part of the largest number of that population, that age population. It is the second largest tract in terms of population too. So their population in that age category would be larger. But so I think the more interesting piece is the percent of the tract that is under 18. And so the last piece, and one of the things that we've been trying to do, and we want to have a good set of information to start moving forward as we begin implementing the comprehensive plan. We went to the assessor and said, hey, can you help us do a couple of things? One, we want to track the units and see how close we are on units, but we also wanted to pull the square footage of commercial real estate and have a good handle on what's in or what's on the ground right now. And so that's one of the things that Nick was able to do for us. And what you'll see is, let's talk about housing first. These categories probably mean less to us in terms of land use because we think of things a little bit differently. But that residential units, the non-condo, that actually, just that can have multifamily in it. It's about whether the only multifamily that could be separated easily in the assessing records are apartments. So if you're multifamily and you are either sold by condo, you do the residential units condo, or if you were multifamily and not sold by condo, although I'm not sure that can happen. But if you owned two duplexes or something, if you owned a duplex, you would probably be in the other category, the non-condo. So this is not a delineation of all multifamily in the community yet.
Karen, where would Foxcroft apartments be?
They would be,
Non-condo?
no,
they would
be
be
apartments.
They'd be apartments. If you have 5 or more units,
Okay.
it's easier. Our assessing captures that well. It's
Okay.
when it's 4 or less, essentially, that they don't
Right.
differentiate. And the reason for that, my understanding is the assessor then considers 5 or more as a commercial.
Got it.
How about the developments along Eastern Road, like Teal Point or Whistler's Landing and things like that? Would those be condo or would those be
Those would be
residential non-condo?
on the
There's a
on
whole string of them
Highland.
on Eastern Road, actually.
Yeah, those are condo
Those are condo?
because they're sold.
Gotcha.
Those are not rental. So by apartment, by default, they're considered, if it, that category is a rental, the apartments are rentals.
Okay.
And part of the reason that I think, I'm assuming that the assessor has this definition is in banking. If you have these larger apartment buildings, those are considered commercial. It's a business. And so that's why they consider it commercial. And then I just, for grins, I wanted to see what the assessed value was. And I think it's pretty remarkable. You can't really use any of this as the total single family values or anything like that. But you can see a blending of all residential units that are, some multifamily, some townhouse, that type of thing. We're at 454,000, and that's all units, not just new units being sold. So that's a pretty high value of existing units. And so what you're seeing is, I've seen monthly records of sales in Scarborough of single family be as high as 600,000. So I think that's interesting. Again, I wouldn't take the value per unit, just because it doesn't translate well to what we're used to seeing, which is single family or multifamily or whatever. But it is just an indicator of certainly where value is. And then,
Karen, just a question
Yeah.
on with the apartments, is that capturing just the building or is that the land value? Is that total value?
I believe that's total value. That's why the condo is a little funky too, because the value is of the land is not in the individual condo records.
Karen, a quick question, this might be getting a little bit off track, but I mean, there was a lot of discussion about the use of the assessor's definition for commercial. Are there other areas where we, count it differently? There's a different definition of commercial, other than when we're, not talking about assessed value in terms of how we count units?
Well,
From a land use zoning perspective, we really consider it residential, so that wouldn't be an area.
Okay.
Right. Right. And that's why I put them up here, because they're housing units and, land use, we don't care how they're sold. We don't care what you call them. If somebody can live in them,
Yeah.
they're a housing unit and their tract is residential. Same with the census. Census, they may give us counts of condominiums and things like that, but in terms of units, a housing unit is a housing unit is a housing unit. The only thing that I thought was, a little bit interesting is the assessor does have that 500 units that are in various senior facilities. The census is treating, I believe, most of those units as regular housing units. And the reason I know that is because our group quarters number from the census is about 400 people. That group quarters, by census definition, are those living in an institutional setting. They don't have their own kitchen, that type of thing. And the vast majority, all but 37 of that 400 was counted as some form of nursing home. So that means, all of the units at Piper Shores and other senior units, they're just, census is recognizing them, and they're in the unit counts. It's only those 300 plus or so that are counted in nursing homes as group quarters. And FYI, for those of you who like details, group quarters is taken out, that 400 folks, they're taken out of the total population when it comes to calculating household size. So when I think I did calculate household size in the data that I gave you, when you take those out, you really see our household size did decline. And I think that's interesting because previous decades, it really didn't decline as much as many other communities. But we did see a decline in our household size numbers. I think other communities also saw some decline, but it was particularly notable for us since previous years we had not seen, a significant decline. And what that means is that the same number of people use up more housing units. That happened a lot, like when the baby boomers came of age and started forming their own households. There were some really dramatic drops in household size, really in the late 80s and maybe even a little bit before that. So that's where you saw a lot of communities have some major drop in household size. And so I think you're seeing a little bit of that this decade as well. But again, that's an important demographic to take note of because that's a key factor in keeping track of population going forward. 'Cause we'll take our housing units that have been permitted or that turn up in the assessor's units, and we'll apply those household numbers to that. And, again, that can be a number of things affecting the household size, but it is of note that we are seeing a decline. I believe the decline was, 2 point, actually, could you go back to the first chart, I believe? There we go. Scroll down to the next piece. Let's see.
Change.
Keep going back. No, that's changing. Calculate the household size.
Oh, you know
It's in
what?
the memo,
Hang on.
sorry.
I'm
Oh, there we are.
sorry.
There we are.
That's what I
Yeah,
missed.
we dropped from 2.48, 2.5 in 2010 to 2.4. Yeah, and some of that is, our mix. When the census finally comes out with the multifamily household, the mix is probably a little bit different, but I don't think it's dramatically different. We've certainly added multifamily units, but again, I don't think, we are still predominantly a single-family residential community. But I believe the percentage, my guesstimate is that the percentage of multifamily, has gone up a couple of percents in terms of total units. Couple of percentage points. And so sorry about, the last piece on the baseline data is we did separate out retail and office square footage. So we're right around 5.6 million square feet. Thank you, I can read decimal points. And industrial is a little over 2 million. And then the exempt is like the municipal building, Maine Health, and a few other nonprofit square footage. And so we've got about 10 million square feet in what we think of as traditional commercial square footage. And so I think that's important to have as a good baseline. Nick is going to run this same report for us at the same, each year, so that we can begin to see not just residentially, but commercially where we're going with that. And sorry for boring you with very detailed numbers, but again, we wanted to create a good base. We'll be creating the dashboard that we talked about, probably 2 years ago. Now that we have this good set of info, and now that I'm not worried that the census missed a bunch of people. The one caveat I would say about the census is just so that you guys know. So the census was 4/1/2020, and that month, and perhaps the next month, you had a tremendous influx of adult children probably coming home because of the pandemic. But the Census Bureau worked very hard to make sure that the college students were counted where they should have normally been, which was in their college towns. So it's one of the things that there can be a little bit of a discrepancy perhaps between what we're seeing as traditional year-round population and maybe what voter registration was in November of 2020. What we assume is that the 2020 numbers for the election probably were very high, and students probably re-registered if they were still at home. So those numbers definitely took a jump. But again, the Census Bureau considers if you're a college student and you're living in Orono traditionally during the census, you're counted in Orono, not in Scarborough. And
I'm sure I buy that.
that's
My
there.
kids.
Where they do their laundry should be the.
Right, there you go. That is not on that's not on the census question. But they worked with particularly the major universities, and they actually took the enrollment numbers and made some adjustments. So like if you take a large city, I don't mean to get off track, but take a large city like the city of Austin, or Boston is another good example. The city of Austin's population would have gone down 40,000 people if they had not taken, where they were. And probably on April 1st, I don't know if everybody was home by April 1st. Anyway, so that was a very interesting challenge, I think, for the Census Bureau to make sure that they're reporting it the same way that they traditionally report it. So that was there's lots of detail and lots of things that can get covered up when you're looking at census data. So we are looking forward to the additional detailed work that's going to be coming out probably in 2022. So the one thing I would say is there is a difference between the census counts, the Census 2020, and what is known as the American Community Survey, the ACS data. And those don't always match up. And so I'm not sure what the 2020 ACS data, which will come out probably December is when it usually comes out. So there'll be some comparisons there. The other important piece to note is that the detailed socioeconomic data, like income, really the descriptive characteristics of the household itself, all of that data now comes from the American Community Survey. There is no such thing as the long form survey from the census anymore. It is strictly, how many people in the household, race, age, ethnicity, number of units. The real detail still comes out of the ACS. And that's why making sure that the ACS is somehow at least reasonably close to the Census 2020 number is really important, because that's where we get the other data. It's where we get a lot of the things that are really important for us to be tracking, particularly as we look at affordable housing. So I have some test layouts that I'm going to be sending you in the next couple of weeks that will allow you to compare Scarborough to the other coastal communities, and then another batch that compares us to the largest communities, Portland, South Portland, Westbrook. So, and you'll be able to play with that. It's an infographic, but you can click on it and I will show you the data behind it. And I believe we've been talking with Allison a bit, and I think what we wanted to do is pair some of this with the release of the survey that the council is working on, and sort of have that all together as this is all about Scarborough. Here are your opinions. Here's the data. All that. So we're working on that section of a website that should be pretty interactive for people to explore. Oof, sorry about that.
Oh, that's good stuff.
And we'll get this posted on the web as well. I wasn't quite sure how to hook an Excel spreadsheet to the agenda, so we'll be sure to get this up on the web so people can find it later as well. Great, thanks, Karen.
So we're good with the census data up there for now. Is there anything we should be, I'm just kind of comparing some numbers and trying to compare it, GMO numbers in terms of our comp plan, percentage of commercial real estate to our whole assessed value. It looks like we're at 27%, which was kind of right on a number that we had targeted. We wanted to move up our assessed commercial value to residential value.
Yes.
In the comp plan long ages ago, so it looks like that's creeping up.
It is, and so that was one of the reasons why I went to Nick and said, we just need, it's been calculated a bunch of different times, or different ways. And so Nick and I are working on that percentage. There's 3 or 4 different ways to calculate that.
Yeah.
And so we were going to do that. We were also going to do one calculation with, the personal property in it, because that's really commercial. Doesn't include fleet vehicles or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we're working on a couple of ways to compute that so that we have a good baseline. And that's really what this whole exercise was about.
Yeah.
Let's find those. And I think at some point, as we're talking about implementation, we may find we want to establish those types of benchmarks for us.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be crucial, and we'll go back to this data as our starting point.
The other one I was looking at, I know it's not apples to apples, were housing units and breaking it down and comparing it to the GMO. And I came up with 172 as a yearly increase in housing units. I know that's not apples to apples because there are accessory units and probably other sorts of units that accumulated in there.
Right. It's,
But
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
where did we end up with our permit numbers, in the growth management?
I would have to go back and do the 10-year average. I think that we do have that in one of the
What did
presentations.
we just changed it, though, we just moved.
Oh, I see. What is-
140.
It's 144 now. It was 135 and now it's
Yeah.
144 now. Yep. And remember now, that is total units, where before, you could buy half a growth permit
Right.
with a half a unit. Now it's a 1-for-1.
Yeah.
But then council's also made a bunch of exemptions for 1-bedroom. So we are,
Mhm.
as we sort of, I think, talked about at the last meeting, maybe, I might be getting my meetings confused. We now have, we are tracking in real time the growth permits and
Yeah.
unit counts.
Mhm.
And that information is available on the planning department's webpage. I can do a quick.
And
Maybe I
while
can do a
he's,
quick.
yeah,
let's
while
see.
he's looking,
Oh, boy. I don't. I had YouTube pop up on me.
oh, there you go. So one of the distinctions I do want to make is that whenever you're talking about the census and doing population estimates, then we use building permits because there's number one, the census wants to use building permits because everybody issues building permits and they don't know what growth permits are. So building permits are the key factor in estimating population going forward. And they've also done some very detailed calculations about the percentage of building permits that actually turn into units on the ground. And so that's why they use building permits. And what we found is with the census that this tracked very well with our building permits.
Yeah.
Which you would think since we provide them with that, but you never know what happens when you give things into a big machine.
No doubt. I didn't want to sidetrack us, but
Yep.
I always try to interpret from the numbers.
Mhm. And that is one of the pieces that we definitely looked at.
A quick question. Karen, you mentioned you're going to be putting together some grids that compare us to coastal communities, to larger communities, et cetera. We've grown a bit in the last 10 years. We're now kind of firmly in the top 10 municipalities in the state
That's right.
and continue to grow. From SEDCO's perspective,
Mhm.
how do you think of benchmarking? Are we benchmarked against the Westbrooks and the Bangors and the South Portlands of the world, or are we benchmarked against more of the coastal communities, the Gunkwits, the Yorks, et cetera?
In Cumberland County, we benchmark against both. We look
Okay.
at coastal communities because we are by definition a coastal community, and most of us still feel like that. So we want to look at that. And like Falmouth, Cumberland. In fact, interestingly enough, Cumberland had a higher rate of growth than we did as a coastal community. Not by much, but they still had a higher rate of growth. So we like to track in there so we understand how we compare. But if we're talking about commercial, yeah, we're competing is the wrong word. We are in the same ballpark for folks as Portland, South Portland, Westbrook, Saco. Those are the folks that when we get approached by someone, those are the communities they're looking at. It also depends
coastal.
Yep.
So
Well,
it's
right. And it also depends on what they're looking to do too.
Yeah. That's not helpful. And we're thinking primarily in my mind about this idea of increasing the percentage of commercial over time. Are we increasing that percentage into the league of kind of a Westbrook, which has IDEX and other kind of massive industrial scale developments? Are we thinking of it more in the line of like a Cumberland or like a Falmouth and keeping it more in that coastal zone? Or Yarmouth?
Yeah. I'm
We're
going to,
very different because we're a giant landmass, which a lot of these towns are
Yeah.
not. And a giant landmass, including a lot of it on the other side of Route 1 and on the other side of the Turnpike, which a lot of these folks don't have.
right. And I think, for us, the commercial in Scarborough is limited to a very specific area.
Yeah.
So there's not a giant amount of land still available for commercial. I think there's plenty for future growth. in terms of Scarborough, but it's, it is very directed. And so we basically like to keep track of, to the extent that we can, because we don't necessarily have the assessing data, for other communities, but we look, at the Merida reports when they come out, understanding, where growth is happening, where the square footage is. And quite frankly, we're looking for a particular type of high quality commercial development. And I've always said, it's going to be a little more expensive to develop here for a variety of reasons.
Right. That's just helpful to understand how SEDCO is thinking of this from your benchmark perspective.
Right. And we're going to go through that process with our vision committee too, once now that the comprehensive plan is done. Matter of fact, that's part of what we're going to be looking at. And that's one of our tasks, is to try to establish what is our benchmark going to be for the future. And just, what has happened with our previous vision that was done right after the last comprehensive plan a few years later. Once we completed that, we took it back to the council for them to review and bless. And they didn't adopt it, but they accepted it. And that's what we worked off of for the last 10 years.
Great, that's helpful.
Yeah,
Robin,
and I would just mention too that I think comparing us to Cumberland and Yarmouth and those coastal communities is a little bit of apples and oranges.
It is.
Because we have 295 and I-95, and I don't know. I mean, I know that this is in the SEDCO lens, but I feel like we're a little more closely aligned with somebody like Saco in that range kind of thing. So this is, keep doing exactly what you're doing. I think these insights are really, really interesting, especially the Western growth under 18, because that's where all the school children are living, because it's where it's more, cheaper to live. Or,
single family.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's, I just caution us, because I'm thinking the other town that we might be similar to is Falmouth, who also has 295 and I-95, but they're economic development growth is not anywhere near ours either.
Right.
So.
And, just for us, I think it's important for us not to lose sight of our coastal roots. And that's really why we look at some of the other communities. Plus, I will say that Cumberland, interesting from all the different towns, Cumberland was very aggressive with their business park because they offered a blanket 50% tip to anybody who located in that park. So we lost some businesses to Cumberland. So that's actually, that's an anomaly there. But that's why we track all of them. Again, not losing sight of our roots, but also there are some niche pieces of development that happen that we're like, wait a second, how did we lose something to Cumberland? And that wasn't the only issue but you'd be surprised.
Okay, we move on to the next item. This is other comments.
Sure. All right, so the next item, Karen and I took a crack at breaking down the action items in the comp plan, taking our driving successes spreadsheet and trying to do as best as we could as going through them, sort of assign committees where we think might be the best lead on particular projects. As part of that, it's sort of understood by us in developing this that it's ultimately, town council. When we list a committee, really that's town council, right there. So ultimately, we need to sort of somehow work with town council to understand the priorities as we send these out to all the various committees. There's going to be, if everyone tries to jump in and prioritize everything, we're going to have a whole lot of resources needed and dedicated, both staff resources, bring in outside experts for a number of these things. So we really need to, it's not as though this is just send it out and everyone jump and go. I think there needs to be some further refinement of this, but so just sort of that's sort of just a baseline understanding by at least us in putting this together that, yep, we've assigned these committees. but the committees, we're all advisory to council.
Do you have a
And then-
list of what the committees are in the town of Scarborough? I just don't want to. Are they in the-
It's in the, it's on the website.
Okay.
There's a list of committees. It's, if you go to the boards and committees, they're all listed out right there. And then, so, again, we've listed out all the committees, and there's also a bunch that were listed as town manager. Again, we understand
He
that the
doesn't
town
know that
manager, but the town manager is then gonna, public works, public safety, planning, clerks up, whatever the case may be, but we just sort of said, all right, let's put it under the umbrella of the manager, and then recognizing that,
Right.
we all advise our manager, so it's sort of working from that umbrella perspective. So I don't really know well, you tell me how you want to go through this, but we just right now listed these alphabetically. I'm not sure how much time folks have had to go through
Alphabetically
it.
by committee,
By committee, yes, thank you. Thank you very
or
much.
by the first committee.
Yes.
And
So,
color coding is by vision?
yes.
Yes, that was from, the first chart is the full chart that had everything in it.
Yeah.
And this one, we just tried to streamline it a bit.
Right, we sort of, as you just said, we tried, we sort of took out the recommendation number, I think there's, just tried to, again, just sort of streamline it exactly. And, as we send these, once as a committee, we're able to talk about this and say, yep, these seem generally reasonable. There may be a few that we want to move around a little bit. We're certainly open to that discussion, obviously. That's why we're here.
And Jay, just so everyone knows, there's no different, there's usually a lighter shade and a darker shade of the same color. That doesn't have any meaning. The only reason that's there is because in the original chart, they did a dark and a light to make it easier to follow across, and we just didn't take that out.
Yeah, the one column on this one that I think would be helpful to see is I think we said the resource one, which was a star, kind of a 1 to 3 of how many resources were required. Because I think as we look at this by committee, it'll be interesting to see how many, if we give one committee, for example, all of the high resource and near-term priorities, that might not be good.
It's column G between F and H there.
Oh, it's really buried.
There you go.
Oh, Karen, nice work.
Oh, there.
Yes, Karen got to do the fun part of refining the
Oh, yeah.
spreadsheet after we went through it. So there you go.
Cool, okay.
And that's in yours. Everybody got that.
Yeah, I
So
saw
you
that in
pull it apart.
the stuff that I got.
Yeah.
Yep, I didn't know it was buried in there either. Great. So
Well, Jay, do you
yeah.
maybe want to start with the one that, we struggled with
Yeah,
particularly?
I'm trying
I
to
think
find
it's still highlighted. It
I
should be a
thought
bright
I
green.
thought it was 2, Karen. I thought it was 2. Go ahead. Let's see. It was a long ranger one, right?
Yeah, it was. I guess, you're in the streamline table. Go to the full action.
I think,
Try the full action.
I
and
think
see if
that's
it's
where we
still there.
left it.
I thought I put it in.
Yep,
Oh, there it was.
There she is. Okay. Oh, boy. All right, what was this one? Let's remember what oh, geez, I gotta make that bigger. Yeah. If I can't see it on this screen, you can't see it on that screen. All right, so the town's growth management ordinance should be reviewed to ensure the regulations are adequately addressing the needs of the community. So we listed that as an initial blush at long-range planning committee.
But
And we
that's-
certainly know the ordinance committee council has spent quite a bit of time recently on the
I was-
growth management
I
ordinance.
was gonna say, I looked to my friendly neighborhood town councilor. on that one. Because that has gotten a lot of attention from the ordinance committee, from the town council directly. That doesn't, it no longer feels like an LRPC.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. We spent a lot of time talking with Jay and with other members of the council, the chair about Tucci and Ken Johnson, who, really did lion's share of the work with revising that. So we're trying to get that into a form that is easy to monitor and to use as a management tool. That's kind of the big thing. Now, who should do that or how we should do that, I gotta work that out. But we get questions every day, about where are we on permits, and where do they stand, and building permits or road permits, and oh, by the way, I want another 1,000 units for the downtown, stuff like that. It's happening. So
And
we need that screen somehow.
And I
for
think
that.
our starting point was really if I recall it correctly, whether it's the charter or the ordinance, and I get a little confused as to which is charter, which is ordinance, does talk about the long-range plan and looking at growth. So we sort of said, okay, they're the advisory committee to council, and that's how we landed on long-range planning. So that was sort of
I'll note
our
that
starting point.
one thing I'll note that the GMO has kind of an annual and really a 2-year sunset on it. Does the council want to have the long-range planning committee maybe 6 months in advance of that, say, perform some sort of a review that then advises the council with some things? That might be something for us to do rather than us have the lead, as it were.
You hit it the nail on the head. I think the best opportunity for the input and guidance from long-range planning is for you to sort of boil it down for us strategically. What are the 2 or 3 things, the imperatives we need to focus on, and then we go from there into delving into the detail.
Yeah, that feels like.
So that's what I said.
Emphasis on that review, not.
Exactly. And the review, therefore, is not something we hit now, but we do it on cycle
Right.
with the renewal provisions of the GMO.
And I can't remember, the original GMO had a specific statement.
I think it was 3 years. I believe it's been refined to, it might be annually at this
I don't
point.
know if that's a good question.
Yeah, we'll go
I
back,
don't know,
we'll
it's
go back
2
and
years,
check.
but it's got an annual cycle in there as well. So
Yeah,
it's
well-
kind of weird.
Well, and the thing for me that drives it is what we talked about earlier. It's I think it's the rolling 5-year average, the state.
It's
for
a-
the permits. Is it
10-year,
Is
but
it 10?
Yep.
Okay, so
I think
is
we'll look at that.
whatever it
Yes,
is,
it was
that's sort of where the snowball begins.
Mhm.
Right, so. So anyway, that's kind of my 5 cents that,
Yeah.
on the thing. Other counselors may differ. I'll go around after the meeting and have a chat with others and see what they think about it. But it was really, Paul, with Tom Hall, and Ken and John Lucci, who really were up to their eyeballs in this thing. And it's complicated. I have a very, very difficult time, and I think other members of the council, are pretty close to it, but even so, it's really hard to give quick answers.
It is, and part of it is of just watching the town council meetings on this one. The members who have really dived into it have gotten a real sense of ownership on it.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't want to step on that sense of ownership.
Yeah.
But it does feel like we can be if you will, the advocates of the comprehensive plan in whatever that cyclical review or cyclical renewal process is. And that I think the role that we can serve.
I think the other role that long-range planning can serve with respect to this is what we need to do with all of them is say, all right, here's the initial statement. What do those actions look like? First is a review of permits or, so we can lay those out and, the last piece of that is, and present it to the council or whatever. So there's a mini action plan within each one of these statements. And that's really the next step that we need to do.
Is the ordinance committee primarily made up of counselors?
Yes,
So I
it's
see
a
this-
subcommittee of the council,
That's
so
what I
it's
thought.
three counselors.
So I see it as a 2-part process where sort of Lrpc is looking at the data and helping to extract some insights, I think, to provide to the ordinance committee or council kind of a thing for policy decisions, because the ordinance committee is a little more politic than sort of looking at the data and the impacts on the community and things like that. So am I on the same page with you all? Is this what you all are
That's
thinking?
I think that's
Yeah.
what I'm hearing over
Okay.
here.
Sort of an example of that would be, over the last 2 years, the following number of permits have been granted. And they've been driven down to the following levels on affordable housing versus single family housing versus whatever. And within those, we see that we're lagging on affordable housing despite the comprehensive plan statements on X, Y, and Z. And we just present that as data to the ordinance committee and then let them react to that.
That's a good handoff. I think that would work well. Current committee is the chair is Jean Marie, and then Ken Johnson and I are on ordinance.
I think where I was heading with that, though, is as counselors hear public concerns, public perception, I think the LRPC review is meant to like sort of bring those queries to the LRPC type of thing, because I think the more input we can have before sort of a policy is established, I think is seems more. I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but it seems more complete.
So you're I just want to be sure. So you're really thinking almost a circular, right? Having council
Exactly.
keep this committee, presumably through our liaisons, sort of informed of what they're hearing out there in the field as the political body, as we're looking at the data and say, okay, here's where the data is telling us, council, here's what you're telling us you're hearing.
Yeah.
They're aligning, or there's
they're
something
not,
off here, and
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Let me give you an example. Just to say, so we posted this stuff, right? It's on the website. So the person looking for their own permit will go there and look for it, and then there'll be questions of that nature, very granular. But then there are also the big ones that come up even at council meetings, the Downs update, where we get, what did we give you this year? What were the exemptions you had this year? The additional ones we gave you, the town council, special, exemptions, and then other requests like the pending 1,000 downtown request. So helping us, find a way to sort through that, because it won't go back to the original framers, the three people that worked on it from the council, and it can't be Jay alone. It's sort of so it would be helpful to have the insight of this group, figure out sort of what goes where and where to look, how to answer which group's questions.
Don, would it be helpful if, we've got this list of potential committees, but there's also the council committee. So there could be a second column out here that says, you know what, this is the lead committee that's going to do some of the work, but when their work is done, it's going to ordinance committee, or it's going to communications, or council as a whole. So maybe that's a way to deal with the council piece, is to put who's the council that their work eventually will go to implement.
Yeah. So you have that now, I think, in terms of the committees you've identified, they're like shellfish, for example, or coastal waters. You have that now. But you're right, there's not a really clean handoff other than the liaison to the town council liaisons to those committees. So maybe you could do it that way. There's also some debate about, ordinance versus rules of policy. It's rules of policy is just one of those where we don't use it unless there's a really specific reason for it. We have a signs issue, political sign issue, or something like that. But otherwise, that committee comes and goes. It's not really steady diet of things like ordinance, or like the regulatory committees.
Well, that might be something I think could be useful to say. Eventually, when this step is done, there's a bunch that are pretty easy. They're going to the ordinance committee.
But I think your point there of having a counselor identified as a point person would be helpful. Maybe that's the same person as Jean Marie for the ordinance committee or whatever. But to have a point person carry it.
Yeah, I would think that again, that to that point, potentially that's that liaison to each committee, and then
So that shows that council is
hello. I'm an hour late.
We saved all the good stuff.
Shake Alan's seat.
It's still warm from I'll leave it.
Jay and Karen, I just have a question on sort of the process to date. Has any other staff, like department heads or managers, weighed in on this?
Not yet. This is first cut.
Yeah, because I think that would be good, before like a final is considered, because I'm wondering, is there still a sustainability committee?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. I think they're listed here a few
Yeah, I
times.
just thought
would hope.
that. They would be.
Yeah, we haven't had many changes to standing committees, obviously.
I think they're listed a lot in conjunction with concert. I just saw them.
I think the pest management and conservation is contemplating consolidations, but otherwise there's not been a lot of movement of council committees, other than what we've done with that type of things this year.
And I agree with these suggestions, and I think one of the big unifying theme of them, to what Peter said, is that it's really about tying things back to the comp plan, because counselors will come and go. The general public can't be expected to be as dialed into the comp plan as we are, obviously. And so I think a big part of the Lrpc's role is to be that body that has that kind of provides that continuity and helps kind of keep the eye on the ball, because there will be issues that flare up and perceptions that people have about different things that that we don't want. I think the town generally doesn't want to allow things to just be buffeted back and forth. So
Right.
I think that's the spirit of it.
How do you do that?
Well, I think what we were just talking about was having a mechanism for Lrpc to serve in sort of an advisory and
Coordinating.
analytical capacity to help support the council as they're dealing with queries about growth permits and building permits and things like that. And obviously, devil in the details about how that all works, but I think that was the general idea.
And I think, with this spreadsheet, I think once we sort of come to a general consensus around who the various league committees are, one of the things I mentioned at the outset was there's obviously a lot in here, and there's a lot of these projects require significant resources, not just staff time, but outside consultant work and, just the public's attention, council's attention. So I think what's part of what I see sort of the first steps are is sending this out, having people send back, okay, great, this is what you're telling us. Here's where we see a good fit. Here's where we think we're missing some things, but this is what we would prioritize. Then the long range planning committee saying, okay, we have all these committees who want to prioritize climate adaptation, traffic, land use, housing. Okay, council, we got to prioritize the prioritization here. So in 2022, we look at climate adaptation. In 2023, we look at transportation. In 2020, whatever that may be. So I think this is going to be, really could be a year-long work to do this, because I imagine once we're ready to send this to committees, they're going to want a month or 3 to do their work. And then a month or 3 for us to do our work.
It's
And
a
then a month.
living document.
Yes.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
living,
And-
evolving document.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And priorities shift, as we know.
And
The election.
will it be, in addition to sort of department heads and staff, will it be sent to the individual committees too, to take a look at for buy-in? Like, sustainability shouldn't be looking at that, conservation commission should, or something,
Right.
so that all of them.
Yeah,
have-
that's, I think, part of what we want to hear from you guys. What is the best way to roll this out? Do we roll it, first out to those committee chairs and let them talk about it? Do we roll it out to council? And just help us, whatever we think.
I think we also need to figure out, like, when we've got multiple committees, like, are we just sending it
Right.
blankly to all of them? Or are we saying,
Yeah.
hey, why don't you committee chairs get together and decide who
Yeah,
wants
that's
to
a
do
good
what?
point.
Right.
Yeah, and for me too, it's always important to know what staff thinks, like to have the staff baseline first, even before the committee work that we do, I think is hugely hugely important, because of the, the resources and staff that we do have should inform this as much as possible.
Yeah, and I guess my thought would be is once we're sort of comfortable with committees, is that we then send it to the committee chairs to work with their council liaison, rather than sort of council first. I think, again, as I said before, I sort of see, and it's established in our regs that, these committees were advisory to the council. So
Exactly.
let's make our advice, come up with our thoughts, and then feed it to council. And then, of course, council's part of that process by being liaisons, being at these meetings and talking with each other and saying, oh, hey guys, you're heading into a path that we don't want to follow yet. change course early rather than later.
Yeah, and I apologize, I have to leave. I have a 9:30, so I'm gonna see
Understood.
you all next
Yep.
Have a good
time.
weekend.
Take care.
Good to see you.
You too.
I
See you,
want to
Robin.
apologize following, I don't know where I got the idea. It started at 9.
We've all been there. We've all been there.
And I don't know what happened, but I'm sorry. So it won't happen again. When I was reviewing the materials you sent yesterday evening, and following up on what you were just saying, it just seems as though there's a lot of work for us to do. So talking about it is important to find the guidelines whereby we're digging in and doing the work. But having a structure, and I don't even know if that's the right word, but literally doing the work is, I mean, it strikes me that we meet more than once a month or something, something. I'm not suggesting that. I can't even make a meeting once a month all the time. But practically speaking,
If I agree with Marvin on that one. Just, and especially given, I know we thought we were gonna come out of the comprehensive plan, we took a nice couple months off, but taking a look at this and just thinking about the assignments and the working with the committees, working with council to figure this out, it probably does warrant thinking about more than once a month for a little while here. Just because there's a lot of work to sort through this, even with the very capable work that you guys are doing at the staff level. Because I've got a few observations, just maybe that could help guide where we go. There are a lot of these committee assignments that were obvious. There was a single committee, it was SEDCO, it was Lrpc, it was the planning board, something like that that was very clear. But we got a lot of multiple committee assignments. Two observations on that one. It would be helpful from council's perspective if when you look at these, if there's one that's obviously a lead. The other thing that it might be reflective of is that we've got potentially, some overlap in on roles and responsibilities for some of these committees. That we would need some steer to kind of have one designated a lead and maybe have that reflected in their charter. But I think to Marvin's point, I think some of the easy ones, the ones where there's obviously one committee, we maybe put those to the side for a little bit because we can directly inform those committees that, hey, as we roll out the comprehensive plan, vision 4, task 7, that's clearly you guys, Parks and Rec, take it on. But for the other ones, we'll probably need some more time. We'll need some discussion among ourselves. We'll need to work with those committee heads and figure that out. The other thing I'd say too is, we do have that resource column. I think when you take a look at the resources against, say, any one committee, some of them are really heavy lift. And then some of them are manageable. And then when you compare that too with the time frame, some of them are heavy lift and near term, and some of them are heavy lift and ongoing, which is kind of like, is this a consideration for the town to add resources to this area for staff for long-term, effectively permanent planning and things like that? And that becomes a different exercise. So I don't think we got enough time to do it here. And certainly there are attendance issues with some of our members who come in and out of the meeting and things like that. I'm looking at you, Mark. I'm sorry.
I didn't even oversleep. I thought it was 9. I don't.
But I think just as a steer for the staff, maybe if we can see a list of those multiple assignment sort of tasks that look like they might be a heavier road to hoe on figuring out who is going to be the lead. And then if we can see kind of your thoughts on the balance of time frame and resources for these by committee, so we can get a sense of who we're going to give the huge heavy lift to versus the ones that we're going to have a manageable sort of workload that we're asking them to take on. That'd be helpful.
I just think that we need to go through every item one at a time and identify them. And that's what I think we have real value to add to the whole process, to the council and to all the committees. And I don't.
No, I think you're right, Marvin. I think we do need to go line up. I'm just trying to think almost for dividing our work. If we had one session where we saw just all the single committee assignments, we could probably nail those out pretty quickly. And then we have a separate meeting to discuss the ones where, no, we're actually have to debate these line item by line item and in a lot more detail. So it's more for our work.
Yeah, we could probably break out another tab that says these are ones staff thinks are no brainers, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
they're 3/4 of these should be pretty obvious, right?
We're already doing.
Work
that,
on
Mark.
affordable housing. Oh, hey, housing alliance. Yeah, no
Exactly,
kidding.
correct, yeah.
And then break out, those that whatever percentage is left as to, okay, this is where staff's muddled.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I saw a lot of those were around natural resource usage, like parks, like open space development, et cetera. All the marine ones were kind of in that category as well. But then there was a whole class of ones that this is what SEDCO does. And those are fairly straightforward, and it's more than highlighting to council, hey, this is SEDCO's lift that they've got out of the comprehensive plan. Do they need additional resources, or do they need council's assistance in prioritization? And we can help kind of define that for them.
And my last 2 cents is, in much of the process that I've witnessed in the 9 months I've sat here, it is turning to staff and saying, what do you advise? And we put our heads together for a minute or two and give our opinion and we move on. This one looks to me as though we can really add value to some, we can take work away from, there's a lot of work to do, and I don't think, as much as I respect what Robin just said about turning to staff, I think this is sort of staff turning to us and saying, we need your help. And as clear as you can be where you need help, staff, that's very helpful. But this isn't just sort of a rubber stamp, and not to say anything else has been that way either. But it looks as though there's some work to do here.
My 2 cents coming out of the previous plan is we faced this same issue the last time around, and it just helped us to, a lot of these issues were 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 year processes. So I think the initial fight was that we prioritized with the table that we did the last time to set our priorities and our timeframes, similar to what we're talking about now. I don't think it was as bad as it sounds on the surface. I think it becomes more manageable. And partially because I think we spread it out. There's no immediacy in tackling some of these in the next couple months, but they are ongoing process. It's an ongoing process for the town. So while I appreciate meeting more often, I'm not sure it's feasible for a lot of us and just maintain people's attention, given what we've just gone through with the comp plan. So I'm certainly game for it, but I think we need to, I think we need to prioritize our list, and maybe that is individual members, assessing our thoughts and then sitting down for a meeting and running through, like you say, item by item or group by group or committee by committee to highlight priorities.
Well, maybe a sort of compromise between that. We'll meet in a month, but maybe we can, as committee members, ask staff to kind of do this sorting for us and get your thoughts on that. But we come with a homework assignment. Essentially, all of us are asked as committee members to come back with our thoughts and our kind of full details, so we can do that line item by line item assessment next month. But that gives us something to do, and it'll take some time for both of us. But that's a good month's worth of effort.
Because we're also going to have, ordinary long-range planning things to consider as well.
Council will probably be
Yeah.
sending things to us.
Life
things-
as you know it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also, I know Jay's going to be shorthanded here in a while, so staff is going to be scrambling and not have a lot of time to address some of our needs. So
Yeah, at least the next month with the planning board.
Yeah.
Jamel, where'd you go? I don't know if you heard Jamel's leaving us.
No, I did not.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, mentioned that the last meeting, so.
Everything
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, it's great for him. He's
Yeah.
gonna go be the director in
He's gonna-
Conway. Good for him, but
Good, good.
God
Good for
dang
him.
it.
Where's he going?
He's gonna be the director in Conway, New Hampshire.
Wow.
Yeah,
Good for him.
so, yep, very good for him, but, yeah.
Not so good for us.
Not so great for
He's
us.
walking into a beehive, though, believe me.
My last 2 cents
Yeah.
is as far as meeting once a month versus more regularly, I defer to your experience at Wise Council. It would be very helpful for me to have the next session, if I understood it correctly, going, really nose to the grindstone, and we do our homework and then go through, and it will, I think, it appeared to those less experienced than yourself that exactly what you're saying, that this is manageable. It looks daunting, as a first time.
Yeah, so I think, Jay, I think the thing is to just make that first call of the no-brainers.
Yep.
That we can
Yep, we can make,
move aside
and that's,
concentrate on.
and we can give, typically I know we get this stuff out, give you guys a ton of time. I get that. Sorry about
Yeah.
that, but that's the nature of the beast. But I think where we already have this,
This is just. a
Karen and
sort.
this is a sorting feature, right?
exactly, yeah.
We're gonna go through and grab all the singular items and put those in a tab, say, singular items, staff thinks are set. Of
Yeah.
course, tell us if we're wrong, but, and then here's our duplicates, and those are the ones we can start the next meeting with and try to keep our, our agenda as,
Yeah.
Momentum.
yep.
This is a nit, but one thing that I think would be helpful to me, just looking at this worksheet is, actually putting the vision statement, or at least one vision statement per color on there, actually writing it out so we know what it is. I had to go back to the comp plan to figure out which is which. So unless they're there and I didn't see them. but-
So, yeah, I mean,
Are they there?
They're there in the first
They're
chart.
in this chart, the full action plan.
Are they? So I didn't look at the right tab, probably.
So, yeah, and we don't
okay.
we don't sort of have the how to use, but
Great.
the way would be you sort of see your color and go, okay, what's
Okay.
blue?
There, I just got
Blue is this
Yeah,
guy.
we-
Okay.
So, yeah,
To make it easier to sort, we
yeah,
restricted out, just left
I'll look for the
the,
bolded color. Thanks.
Yeah.
yeah.
we can do a little how to use.
So,
thing here.
certainly we can take vision one out and slap that vision in that column to make it easier.
Yep.
That one we can do.
And I would just say I generally agree with Dave that the meeting more frequently could be challenging for some of us. But I will say, and I think Peter alluded to this, that it may be to the extent that there's a more frequency or a higher intensity on this, it might just be sort of at the front end to kind of
Initial,
help
yeah.
get organized.
Yeah.
And then I think part of the idea is that at that point, it sort of becomes self-perpetuating and there are kind of self-executing things that are happening across the different departments and
Right.
with staff.
Mhm.
And then from that point where it's not like we're spending every meeting, grinding through specific comp plan things. It's more sort of maybe a piece here and there in addition to the regular Lrpc business.
Yeah.
So,
To say many hands make light work. So
Yeah.
you want to get
So-
things out to other committees,
Yeah.
let them spend. It does seem to me that one important piece is a list of studies and other types of work that probably need outside consultants, because that involves spending money and they may not be able to move forward until they have such things. And some of it we know, but that might be one of the first things we ask the committees if we send it to them. Do you foresee the need for outside our consulting work in order for you to get your job done? But
Can we take a bite out of that apple before you send it to committee?
yeah,
Yeah, I think we probably work with the staff who helps those committees to
Yeah.
figure out, because oftentimes committees
That sounds like real value.
sometimes
to
think they can do
streamline.
more than
right.
is possible.
I think that's important for the council to understand. This can't go forward unless we've done
Right.
X.
It seems to me a good thing about this committee is that we don't have any particular dog in any particular fight. I don't know how to put it more than that, but we have the luxury of being able to provide advice
Right.
to staff. So that's where the work comes in. It just looks like there's stuff to do.
And that's part,
Diversity of perspectives to contribute.
and that's part of kind of seeing these ones that have multiple committees or multiple overlap. That's the ones where I think we might need resources just in terms of defining roles, helping coordinate among those other things. And yeah, and I think that's where we could kind of say, should we streamline this? Or, or okay, let's advocate for resources.
And speaking,
And I do like that idea of sort of where we identify, maybe we sort of say, okay, we see Conservation Commission taking lead here, sustainability and Parks and Rec helping out, or sustainability working, so.
Yeah.
Really starting that and then sending it out, and of course, they talk and say, no, one should be the other, then that's fine.
And we can particularly identify where outside consultants might be required. I mean, not to say that we have all the information necessary to make that decision.
But at least start to identify, and certainly one of the things, and I haven't done it yet, is, our staff liaison to sustainability and conservation commission is the same person, right? So I'll talk with Jamie Fitch, our sustainability coordinator, say, what do you see? And that's the piece we haven't done yet. This is really just Karen and I in a vacuum. And so this is starting to open it up and see where we go. And so we can do that prior to the next meeting as well, to help refine these convoluted ones and sort of send it around to the various departments and get their input, and then package it back up, and then we can have that more pointed discussion around those items.
Right, in the meantime, we can all individually sink our teeth into this as a whole.
I was gonna say, if you guys could maybe get that quick sort done and send that out, then we can spend individually, we can each spend time kind of doing our own line item review before the next meeting, and then we'll be able to come together with your conversation results and our thoughts and just have a good session.
That's, speaking only for myself here, if you send out information that you've gathered in the meantime in a couple of weeks or something, I don't know if this is possible or just making work, that would make a difference on how we would approach the next couple of weeks after that. If that makes sense. It's not a meeting, but it's a packet of updated information as far as what other committees are thinking with other staff.
Right.
That'd be helpful too.
Yeah, we hear from staff in the next week or two, say, all right, while you guys are doing here's what we've heard, and here's the further refinement. So say, that aligns, or why are they thinking that? Yeah. Try that.
Is Jamel, has he already?
Today's his official last day. I think he'll be here for an hour or two. Grab his plants and pictures, and off he goes. So, so the next good thing is, he gave us the full month. So we've already had the job was already been posted. It's already closed. Interviews are being scheduled. So if all goes well, we can hopefully have someone new here by the holidays and have that person up and running, and as quickly as that can happen. So things are underway in that regards. But this next planning board round, it really hit me after the last planning board meeting. I went just to sort of remember how it worked, and I showed up in the morning and there's 24 emails from all the developers. We want this pre-con meeting set. I was like, oh my God, those are all me. I used to just ignore those. Like, Mark has read. I was like, oh my, I gotta schedule this, review that. Oh boy.
How long was Jamel here? How long?
4 years, almost to the day. So,
Congratulations, you can only do what you can do.
Yeah.
As far as.
So we'll get through.
Well,
Good luck to him and to us.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And to you.
Yeah.
Can we wrap up any further discussion on the comp plan?
Seems like it's a good
We've got good
pausing
marching
point
orders for
for
everyone.
Yeah.
Any public out there?
I'm not seeing any public in Zoom world.
No public comment? Any miscellaneous notes or outside comments before we adjourn?
Next meeting on the
Would be, first Friday of the month.
8 o'clock.
5th, 8 o'clock, yes, sir. Yep.
And I guess just as apologies as a standing item, I will always be 10 minutes late just for making sure my kid gets on the bus on the way. So,
You'll normally miss the vote on the minutes, so.
yeah.
And the getting of coffee, and I don't know if you guys caught it, but Scarborough Grounds is understaffed, so they weren't able to prepare a box of coffee for us, so I'll have to order the Thursday night. I gotta put a reminder in my calendar.
Let's say hopefully the planning department will have better luck with hiring than the the restaurant.
That's right.
Or the police.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's at every level of position.
Yeah.
Every strata is wild.
Well, with stimulus money ending, maybe that'll, the applicant flow will improve at some level in some of those jobs.
It's sort of an earthquake, though. That's,
Yeah.
that's happened.
It's probably like a whole
Yeah.
separate SEDCO session, but it sounds like there's some structural things that have.
Exactly,
Where aren't there structural changes? besides
Right.
last year?
right. Yeah, everybody's working for marijuana industries. No, I mean, that's what all the articles are saying. That's where it absorbed all the restaurant workers.
All right, stop recording.
Yeah.
Or buying and going.
No, there's real literature on that.
I know.
Is the meeting adjourned?
Yes.
All right, meeting adjourned.